Hello, creepy peoples.
Today we're doing coincidences in history. Alright. So such strange coincidences that might give you chills. Thomas Jefferson and John Adams died hours apart on the same day, July 4th, 1826, the 50th anniversary of American independence. When the Continental Congress convened in 1775 in Philadelphia, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams became fast friends. The tall, lanky Virginian and stocky Massachusetts native worked together to draft the Declaration of Independence and spent time together as diplomats for the new United States and Europe. Their relationship frayed, however, when Jefferson succeeded Adams as president in 1801 on opposite sides of the Republican and Federalist divide. The two men remained estranged in 1812 when Adams sent Jefferson a New Year's greeting. The reconciliation spawned a remarkable correspondence that lasted for nearly 15 years. On July 4th, 1826, the country celebrated 50 years since declaring its independence from Great Britain. The 83-year-old Jefferson passed away at his Virginia estate, Monticello. The 90-year-old Adams on his own deathbed in Quincy, Massachusetts, and unaware of his friend's death, whispered a few last sadly mistaken words. Thomas Jefferson survives. History added a postscript to his remarkable coincidence in 1831 when James Monroe became the first of the first five U.S. presidents to die on Independence Day. James Madison, Jefferson's close friend and fellow Virginian, who succeeded him in the White House, died on June 28, 1836, after refusing stimulants offered by his doctor in order to prolong his life until July 4th. So he knew his friend was dying the same day, but he didn't know his friend died.
These are wrong ones. Less than a year before John Wilkes Booth killed Abraham Lincoln, Booth's brother Edwin saved the life of Lincoln's eldest son, Robert. Edwin Booth was a devoted supporter of the Union during the Civil War, but he also had a more personal connection to the martyred President Abraham Lincoln. In late 1864, Lincoln's son, Robert Todd, was traveling via train from New York to Washington, D.C. During a stop in in Jersey City, New Jersey, he stepped back on the crowded platform to let others pass by, pressing his back against the stopped train. When the train began to move, Lincoln fell onto the tracks and would have been gravely injured or worse if a stranger hadn't caught him by the collar and hauled him back onto the platform. As he later wrote, Lincoln immediately recognized his savior as the famous stage actor Edwin Booth and thanked him. For his part, Booth only later learned the identity of the man he had rescued. His friend Adam Badeau, a colonel in the Union Army, wrote the actor to congratulate him for saving the president's son, who by then was serving as Badeau's fellow officer on General Ulysses S. Grant's staff. Badeau. What?
You skipped one.
Oh my god.
You read mine instead.
Oops. We'll read that one. Then I'll read the next one, I guess.
Robert Lincoln was on the scene for not one, not two, but three presidential assassinations. Less than a month after sitting on his father's deathbed in April 1865, Robert Todd Lincoln resigned this U.S. Army commission and moved to Chicago with his distraught mother. He later married, had children, established a successful law practice. He also remained active in politics, accepting the post of Secretary of War in the administration of President James A. Garfield in 1881. That July, Lincoln was at the railroad station Washington, ready to travel to New Jersey with Garfield, who had been in office less than 2 months at the time before his train left the station. However, a deranged, disgruntled office seeker named Charles Gattu, shot Garfield in the back. The president died of complications from the wound 2 months later. In 1901, President William McKinley invited Lincoln to Buffalo, New York to attend the Pan American Exposition and Lincoln arrived while the event was already in progress and was heading to meet the president when the anarchist Leon Zalgus fatally shot McKinley in the chest and abdomen in front of a crowd well-wishers. Lincoln, who in the latter part of his career served as president of the Pullman Company, was said to have remarked that there was a certain fatality about the presidential function when I was president.
Right. Sorry about that, guys. My fault.
She can't read.
I can too. Faster and a lot better than most people. I said most people, not you.
Shut up.
What?
I said shut up and read.
I'm sorry, you want me to what now? Mark Twain came into the world with Halley's Comet. A periodic comet known as Halley's Comet returns to Earth's vicinity about every 75 years, or take a bit due to the gravitational pull of the planets it passes. Back in the 18th century, English astronomer Edmund Halley concluded that reports of a comet reappearing in 1531, 1607, and 1682 actually referred to the same comet returning in periodic intervals. He predicted the comet's reappearance in 1758, though he died before the prediction came true. Halley's Comet was in the skies again when the celebrated author Samuel Langhorne Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, was born on November 30th, 1835 in Florida, Missouri. Florida, Missouri? That's a place?
Guess so.
By 1909, 74 years had passed, and Twain offered a prediction that his own death would, like his birth, coincide with the comet's appearance. He was quoted as saying, "It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't go out with Halley's Comet. The Almighty has said, no doubt. Now here are these two unaccountable freaks. They came in together, they must go out together." As it happened, Twain died of a heart attack on April 21st, 1910, the day after Halley's Comet emerged from the far side of the sun. The comet's appearance proved particularly spectacular that year for other reasons as well. It passed only 13.9 million miles, or 22.4 million kilometers from Earth, or about a 15th of the distance between Earth and the Sun, and for the first time the comet's passage was captured on camera. Halley's Comet appeared most recently in 1986 and is scheduled to enter our skies again in 2061. I will be dead before it comes again.
Are you sure?
2061? Yeah, I'll be dead. Better be dead.
Let's see here. The Civil War began in Wilmer McLean's front yard and ended in his front parlor in the summer of 1861. Wilmer McLean and his family were living in his wife's plantation near Manassas Junction, Virginia. As Union forces approached, Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard took over the farm as his headquarters. On July 21st, 1861, Confederate and Union troops clashed in the first major battle of the Civil War along the small stream known as Bull Run, who ran through McLean's property. A second major battle, the Second Battle of Bull Run, took place on the same ground in August 1862. By the end of 1863, McLean and his family had relocated to the small hamlet of Appomattox. I know that word.
Oh, Appomattox.
Courthouse, some 120 miles southwest of Manassas Junction. McLean who supplied sugar to the Confederate Army, was an Appomattox on April 9, 1865, when Confederate Colonel Charles Marshall approached him for assistance, finding a suitable place to host a meeting between General Robert E. Lee and the Union counterpart Ulysses S. Grant. That afternoon, Lee surrendered his army of northern Virginia to Grant in McLean's parlor, which Union troops later stripped for mementos of the historic occasion. McLean put the surrender house on the market a year later. He wanted to return to Manassas. which he did in 1867, though he never sold the Appomattox house. Instead, he defaulted on the property, and it was sold at a public auction in 1869, now operated by the National Park Service. The McLean home opened to the public in 1949. That'd be a cool house to go look at.
Miss Unsinkable. Violet Jessup was on board 3 gigantic sister ships, Titanic, Olympic, and Britannic. That's the only one I can't ever remember, Britannic or something.
I always forget the Britannic, too.
Born in Argentina to Irish immigrants, Jessup left convent school back in Britain after her mother, stewardess on the Royal Mail Line, became ill. To provide for her family, the 21-year-old became a ship stewardess as well, working on the Royal Mail Line before moving on to the White Star Line. Locked in competition with Cunard for the transatlantic passenger market, White Star launched its trio of gigantic luxury liners, the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic, in 1911. Jessup was serving aboard the Olympic that September during its 5th commercial voyage when the liner collided with the HMS Hawke near the Isle of Wight in southern England. It was later determined that suction from the Olympic had pulled the Hawke directly into the ocean liner. Jessup had made the move to the Titanic in time for the unsinkable ship's maiden voyage in April 1912, when it sailed out of Southampton en route to New York City. She later wrote in her memoirs of the unforgettable night, April 14th to 15th, when the ship hit an iceberg and sank, taking some 1,500 people along with it. Jessup helped other women and children into lifeboats before climbing into one herself. One of the ship's officers placed a bundled-up baby on her lap. After 8 hours on a lifeboat, a ship called the Carpathia rescued Jessup and the others, and a frantic woman, whom Jessup assumed was the baby's mother, snatched the infant from her arms. The 3rd White Star ship, the Britannic, was requisitioned as a hospital ship after World War I broke out. Remarkably, Jessup, by then a nurse in the British Red Cross, was serving aboard the Britannic. In November 1916, when the ship struck a mine planted by the German U-boat in the Aegean Sea, though the explosion caused extensive damage, the Britannic sank less than an hour later. Only 30 people died. More than 1,000 others were saved, including Miss Unsinkable herself. Jessup continued working on cruise ships after the war, eventually compiling a 42-year career at sea before her retirement. She died in 1971.
I'm sorry, but I think after the second ship, at least, that I was on that sank, I don't think I'd go on a ship again.
Yeah. Be like, I am not about to die like this, okay? I'm out.
Right. Okay, 2 Finnish brothers. This one is strange no matter what way one looks at it. In 2002, a pair of 70-year-old identical twin brothers from Raha, Finland, were hit and killed by trucks while riding their bicycles in a snowstorm. They were killed in separate accidents on the same day along the same stretch of road, only about a mile apart. Additionally, as the second accident occurred just 2 hours after the first, the second brother hadn't even learned that his brother had been killed earlier, thereby eliminating suicide as a possible explanation, and making this truly one for the record books, of course. Unusual coincidences between identical twins are not unheard of. There are dozens of cases on record of twins separated at birth and reuniting years later to discover they possess similar mannerisms, food preferences, work at similar jobs, etc. In one case, even married and divorced spouses with the same name and then remarried another person also with the same name. At the bottom.
I heard of that. Actually, I heard of that Jessup lady. It's creepy. It's creepy to be like, yeah, I survived the Olympic sinking, and then I survived the Titanic sinking, and now I'm gonna go on the 3rd one and survive that one too. Like, that's just creepy to me. Like, did she cause them to sink?
Maybe she was a spy.
Did she do it on purpose? Like,
I want to be known in all of history.
As the unsinkable... Oh, Miss Unsinkable?
I mean, you think of Unsinkable Molly Brown, but it was only one ship.
There was some guy that, it seems has either had, people named after him on accident, or he lived through a few too, and I'm wondering if you put it on here.
I don't think so. That doesn't sound familiar.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it later then.
I make these in like a week in advance, so I don't remember everything that I put on.
The Kennedy-Lincoln link. An unusual number of coincidences that occurred between Presidents Kennedy and Lincoln in regards to their assassination. For example, both men were elected 100 years apart, Lincoln in 1860, Kennedy in 1960. They were both succeeded by Southerners named Johnson, and the two Johnsons were born 100 years apart, Andrew in 1808 and Lyndon in 1908. Both assassins were born 100 years apart, Booth in 1839 and Oswald in 1939. And both died before they could be brought to trial. Lincoln was shot in a theater and his assassin was cornered in a warehouse, while Kennedy was shot from a warehouse and his assassin was captured in a theater. Finally, Lincoln was shot in Ford's theater, while Kennedy was shot while riding in a Ford Lincoln. And to top it all off, Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln, while Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy. The list goes on from there and has been the source of considerable debate ever since. Of course, mathematicians have been quick to spoil all the fun by trying to show how all these things were bound to happen despite the long odds, which is why most people consider mathematicians poor party conversationalists.
I do.
Apparently she jokes.
Alright. Gabriel Princip and the Archduke. It's unlikely this one is a 20-year-old Bessanian peasant realized that his actions would set the course of the rest of the 20th century, but that's exactly what it did. When the man took out his pistol and shot twice at the motorcade carrying Austro-Hungarian leader Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie one beautiful June day in 1914, killing both of them. Their deaths set off a chain of events that would plunge the world into one of the bloodiest wars in history, and sow the seeds for the advent of communism and Nazism over the next few decades. And the sad thing is, it need never had happened except for a single remarkable coincidence. Princip, it turns out, was part of the band of conspirators intent on killing the Archduke that day, but he had largely given up once the days earlier attempt to kill the man with a bomb threat, ducking into a cafe for a quick bite to assuage his disappointment as well as his appetite. He had just stepped outside when he spotted Archduke's car stopped before his very eyes, not 20 feet away. The driver had apparently taken a wrong turn, and in the process of backing up had killed the engine, leaving the Archduke and his wife sitting ducks. Thinking quickly, he pulled his pistol, and the rest is, as they say, history. All because of Archduke's driver got lost, and Princip had a taste for bologna.
Bologna is right.
What you get for going the wrong way with the president.
Double homicide, 157 years apart. In a somewhat grisly coincidence, it seems that two women, Barbara Forrest and Mary Ashford, were both victims of a similar crime committed in the tiny village of Erdington, some 5 miles outside of Birmingham in England. Both 20-year-olds who appeared to share the same birthday had been raped and strangled. Their bodies were found 300 yards apart. And both had been found on the same day, May 27th. 157 years apart, 1817 and 1974. Even more remarkable, both had just visited a friend that evening, both had changed into a new dress that night, and both had gone to a dance where they presumably met their killer. The man accused of both their crimes was named Thornton, and that both Thorntons were eventually acquitted for the crime. Okay. What's with the creepiness, people?
The Saga of Mark Chapman's.
Oh.
In December of 1980, Beatles singer, songwriter, and guitarist John Lennon was shot and killed by an obsessed fan in front of the Dakota apartment complex in New York City. His assassin was a man named Mark Chapman, a schizophrenic night security guard and general loser, who has been cooling his heels ever since his Attica prison in upstate New York. 5 years later, NBC decided to go.
That would be Attica.
NBC decided to do a biographical film about Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono, entitled John and Yoko, a love story. Unfortunately, the actor they hired to play Lennon, unbeknownst to them, happened to be named Mark Chapman, making for one of those "you gotta be kidding me" moments Hollywood occasionally suffers from. Once news of the fact broke, the studio quickly recast the role, presumably giving the part to someone who was not named Mark Chapman, and life went on as normal as possible for those who lived in Twilight Zone, however. Mark Chapman, the actor, not the crazed gunman, got his just rewards by playing Lennon in 2007, called Chapter 27. Apparently by then, looking like John Lennon, but having the same name as his assassin was no longer considered weird for some reason. So he still wound up playing Chapman.
Just in a different one.
That's good.
Crossword puzzle gives away D-Day invasion code words. It would have to be one of the biggest long shots in history. In May of 1944, retired school teacher Leonard Dawes, who had been compiling the daily crossword puzzle for London's Daily Telegraph newspaper for over 20 years, put together a series of puzzles that somehow managed to include the names of two of the landing beaches, Utah and Omaha, which are nowhere near the water, by the way. They're beaches, but they're also cities that are nowhere near the water, so it's kind of funny. Along with several other super secret code words like Overlord, Mulberry, and Juno, nobody outside of the General Eisenhower's staff was supposed to know. Assuming Dawes was a German agent, they instantly interrogated the man, only to release him a short time later, and they became convinced the words were entirely randomly chosen. While the chances of inadvertently using one of the code words is not remarkable, Dawes' puzzle contained no fewer than 5 code words, all over the course of 2 weeks. The odds for such a thing happening has to be considered close to 1 in a billion, but I'll leave that for the mathematicians to figure out.
This one trips me out. Okay, Titanic versus the Titan. And what has to be considered one of the truly spooky coincidences of all time. In 1898, author Morgan Robertson, he was born in 1861 and died in 1915, wrote a novella entitled Futility, or The Wreck of the Titan, in which he outlined the voyage of British luxury liner HMS Titan that hits an iceberg while crossing the northern Atlantic and sinks with a large loss of life, in part due to the lack of significant lifeboats on board. The similarities between the fictional story and the real-life loss of the luxury liner, with very nearly the same name 14 years later, was extraordinary. Both the fictional Titan and the real Titanic were triple-screw luxury ships about 800 feet long that hit an iceberg in the month of April while traveling at around 25 knots, resulting in the death of some 2,500 souls. While not identical in every detail, in Robertson's story, the Titan capsizes and sinks quickly while the Titanic remains upright and sinks slowly over the course of a couple of hours.
I've actually heard of that.
That one trips me out.
Pretty freaky. Lee Harvey Oswald employed where'd it go? At the Texas School Book Depository. There may be literally thousands of people out there at any given moment, and who would like to kill the President of the United States. Of these, only a tiny fraction actually possess the means to do so, skilled with a firearm or explosive, etc., and of these, almost none of them will ever be afforded the opportunity to do so. This is what makes Oswald's case so remarkable. Consider that here is an ex-Marine sniper with Marxist leanings and a desire to make himself famous by killing a world leader, who purchases a high-powered rifle through the mail for $15. Only $15?
Yeah.
Damn. And then somehow gets a job at the one place the President of the United States motorcade is going to pass within 50 yards of, just a month beforehand. Quite a remarkable coincidence that was to provide Oswald, who already had the means and the motive, with the opportunity to commit one of the most heinous crimes in history, and one that remains controversial to this day.
And it's funny because, like, nobody even knew that the cars were going to go past there when he got the job.
Nope. They've never really told, when keep the president safe, so you don't tell the route that it's taking.
Yeah. On June 20th, 1940, Soviet archaeologists uncovered the tomb of Tamerlan, a descendant of Genghis Khan. A warning inscription read, "Whoever opens my tomb will unleash an invader more terrible than I." They opened it anyway. Germany invaded the Soviet Union 2 days later.
If not for the 200-year difference, Jimi Hendrix and George Handel would have been neighbors. They lived at 23 and 25 Brook Street, respectively, in London. Interesting.
There were only 2 cars in the state of Ohio in 1895. They ran into each other. Then there was no cars.
That's just ridiculous. It's like there's a field. He hit the one big giant rock that was in the middle of it, Like, what the hell?
The one tree in the middle of it.
Yeah. Stalin, Hitler, and Franz Josef, who are collectively responsible for about 80 million deaths, all lived in Vienna at the same time. So we should kill all the people from Vienna?
Just the fact that they all live together.
Not together, just in the same city.
Separated at birth, a set of twins from Ohio, each grew up knowing nothing of the other existence. They were both named James on their adoptions, which might be a weirder coincidence of their respective families. Both grew up to be police officers and married a woman named Linda. They each had a son, one named James Allan and one named James Allan. They also each had a dog named Toy. They both got divorced, but later each remarried a woman named Betty. What's that look for?
Oh, so the sons had the same name, they were just spelled differently. Freak. Crazy. The Hoover Dam's first and last victims. The first worker to die during the dam's construction was J.G. Tierney on December 20th, 1922. The last person to die there was J.G. Tierney's son, who died on December 20th of 1935. Just 13 years later. Freaking creepy shit. Stop it. Stop it, Risa.
Hitler was born 129 years after Napoleon. He also came to power 120 years after Napoleon invaded Russia, 129 years after Napoleon, and was defeated 129 years after Napoleon. So Hitler's Napoleon.
Reincarnated. The license plate number for Archduke Franz Ferdinand's car, in which he was assassinated, was was that III?
I don't even know what you were.
118 there.
I think so.
It looks like III 118. The official end of World War I was Armistice Day. No way. 11/11/18. Wow. A, armistice. I can be 11, 11, 18. That's just crazy.
That's probably 1918.
Just nuts.
In 1975, a man who was killed when he was struck by a taxi in Bermuda. An unlucky passenger had to witness it. A year later, the same taxi driver was driving the same passenger when the taxi struck and killed the original victim's brother.
What? That's crazy. During World War I, the British Army turned a passenger ship, the RMS Carmania, into a battleship disguised as another passenger ship, the German SMS Trafalgar. The disguised ship sank a German ship off Brazil in 1914. That ship was the real Trafalgar, which German says is supposed to look like the British Carmania. What? What? So the Carmania was disguised to look like the Trafalgar, and the Trafalgar was
just. And they both shot each other.
I need some.
In the 1930s, a man named Joseph Figlock was surprised by a falling baby landing on his shoulders. The same day, the next year, the same baby fell on him again at the same spot. Neither Figlock nor the baby was harmed.
So he needs to just stand right there so that when the baby falls, it doesn't die.
My question is, where's the parents watching the baby falling out of the wall, the window?
The wall, yes.
Of course, have you seen the window baby cages?
Yeah.
They're freaking trippy. I'll have to put a picture up.
When designing the landscape scenes for video game Deus Ex, one of the artists left out a major landmark of the New York City skyline, the Twin Towers. To cover the flub, the game made up something about a terrorist attack. This game was made in 2000. Just a year before the real Twin Towers got blown up by planes. My pretty girl.
South African astronomer Daniel Dene D. Twain was given a lecture at the age of 49 about how death could come at any time.
Poker face.
On finishing, he popped a mint into his mouth with a little too much vigor and choked to death. Death can happen at any time.
Look at her. She's just sitting here all calm, like literally sitting so in my hands.
Yeah, look at this little belly. Oh, you tickle it too much.
But take her so I can take the paper.
Oh my goodness.
She's just so cute.
Oh, my big girl.
When his sister committed suicide after a failed relationship, one man vowed revenge against Henry Zieglin, the man who broke her heart. He shot a lodged in a nearby tree. Years later, Henry was clearing that very land and used dynamite to remove the tree. The bullet was dislodged with considerable force. It struck him and killed him. It was supposed to shoot when he shot at him, it missed, but then when he blew up the tree, it then did exactly what it was supposed to do before.
The first British soldier killed in World War II is buried only several meters from the last British soldier killed in World War II, not intentional.
What? Ow, ow, ow. What is she doing to my back? Oh, shit. Oh, the first British American soldier and the last British American soldier.
Buried within feet of each other.
That is crazy.
That means.
Yeah, that's just crazy. Rome was in legend founded by Romulus, who was said to have been raised by a wolf along with his brother Remus. The last emperor of Rome was named Romulus Augustus.
On May 22nd, 1975, twins John and Arthur Malforth both suffered from heart attacks living 120 kilometers apart. They were admitted in separate hospitals and were not aware of the other's condition. They each died shortly after.
Dun dun dun.
Twins are trippy.
Twins are really trippy. American writer Anne Parrish found a book of fairy tales, Jack Frost and other stories, and proceeded to tell her husband about how much she loved the book as a child. On opening it, she discovered this written on the inside cover: Anne Parrish, 209 North Webster Street, Colorado. So it was hers.
Mm-hmm.
From when she was a kid. And she ended up with it again. That's crazy.
If I remember correctly, she was in like London or something trippy.
When she found it?
Yeah. And Mr. George D. Bryson checked into a Brown Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky, only to find that the previous occupant was also Mr. George D. Bryson.
Not him. Some other dude with his name.
Yeah.
In the 1920s, legend has it that 3 Englishmen met on a train somewhere in Peru. The first one was called Bingham, the second Powell, and the third Bingham Powell. Okay, that's just weird. Not creepy, just weird.
King Umberto I of Italy had a weird dining experience when he found that he and the owner of the restaurant at which he was eating were born on the same day in the same town and had both married a woman named Margarita. On July 29, 1900, the king learned that the restaurant's owner had been shot and killed in the street. Later that day, the king was also assassinated.
Oh my god. Ooh. Edgar Allan Poe's only novel, the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, tells of an ill-fated Antarctic voyage. In one scene, 4 shipwrecked survivors, adrift on a raft, decide to eat the cabin boy, Richard Parker, to survive. In 1884, a ship called the Mignonette sank, leaving 4 survivors. They, too, decided to cannibalize the cabin boy to survive. The cabin boy's name, Richard Parker.
So, did those trip you out? They sure tripped me out when I found them.
Apparently, they tripped me out, too.
Like and subscribe or share. Do you guys have any coincidences in your life that are trippy or know of any more? We can always do a part 2 at some point. There's a bunch of coincidences that are trippy. So yeah. We're gonna make her do one more video before I can go to work. Anyways, like, subscribe, and share.
Bye, all.